in our banks to do that.
Right.
So yeah, thank you again for that. Now regarding technology, and this is one thing that I enjoy a lot about technology, from where we came up from and today. Are we spending so much money on good technology that I think we need the best of the best? Or do you think we're just living and trying to learn as we go? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the US healthcare system, as from a technology standpoint, we are, we're doing quite well. I mean, I think that just looking at COVID and the manner in which the vaccines and the industry were able to pivot to meet demand, were really quite impressive. And I don't know that any other, infrastructure would have been there to do that. But I mean, I think it's important to point out that that's also as a result of some of the, partnerships that were with government agencies and if you look at technology and some of the CAR T therapies that are being produced in the U.S. And to address health outcomes, and these are really life-saving technologies, not just life-changing.
Sure.
It really is quite impressive. However, when you look at how technology is not being deployed, or at least up until 2020, wasn't being deployed in a really efficient and smart manner for healthcare. I think we've catapulted ourselves forward by a decade or more in the last 2 years. Utilization of technology, being more comfortable with digital therapeutics, and having an interaction like this on screen with a physician or a therapist has been really promising. My cautionary note there is, like, I think that there can be a lot of value derived from technology and tech-enabled healthcare. The question that I think we need to make sure that stays at the forefront is who's going to be the beneficiary of that value. Is it going to be private equity? Is it going to be the major legacy players that just take money out of one pocket and keep it in another? I saw, as I was driving down a local route here, an advertisement for an emergency room, a major hospital in the area with notoriously high reimbursement rates, emergency room virtual care, right? I happen to know that hospital, they're playing the market because they know that the state has now dictated that they get the same reimbursement for in-person care, which means that the state of New Jersey, if they're the payer, or you, if you're the consumer, you're going to be paying $1,200 for a call with an ER physician virtually. Like, that, to me, is using technology, and it's not driving value because you're not getting better health outcomes. You're not, right? You're just you're not using technology to better the system. And so I think that's where appropriate regulation and smarter regulation would be really helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think we can't rely on technology and the promise of technology to solve healthcare. I think it can help, but I think it has to be coupled with really smart policies and regulations that serve the true payers of healthcare, which is members and government payers and employers.
Yeah, so thank you again, by the way. So I've been in the technology field for the last over 30 years and plus, right? What I have noticed when I used to work in the healthcare, section, HIPAA laws were not liking technology at all because they're getting into the manual versus electronic. And
Right.
is it safe or is it not safe, right? But I think let's fast forward 10, 15 years later. It seems like we are learning so much and it's gone better from a paper and electronic point of view. What are your thoughts on that part? Do you think
Yeah.
from a paper to electronic and safety and security, are we getting a lot better now?
Yeah, we're there. We're there. When the HIPAA laws were passed, there was a directive, and I love that, talking about HIPAA nobody enjoys talking about HIPAA except for me, but HIPAA is like 10% about privacy and 90% about standardized transactions.
Right.
So that we can all talk to each other in the same language
In
in
the same
healthcare.
language, right.
And so that's really helpful, I think. And so from a safety perspective, in terms of sharing PHI and those protections, like we have many years under our belts, and I'm very comfortable with navigating technology and PHI, personal health information, in that world, and all those safety valves and nets that we've put in place. The promise of HIPAA, right, that we then have these standardized transactions that allow us to have one hospital talking to another hospital. Everybody in your audience has probably gone to a hospital, and let's say they were just at either a sister hospital or a urgent care down the street that said, no, you need to go to the ER. And you have to fill out the same piece of paper 10 times, asking for your name and your email address and your insurance information. And you think, if Amazon knows, everything about me from my purchases, how does my healthcare company not know this stuff already? Why do I have to do this every time? And I think we're getting to a place, we have to incentivize financially that interaction and interoperability amongst the systems. But I also want to be a pessimist here, maybe a cynic, and explain to your viewers why that might be, right? So if I went to an emergency room, at a local hospital is Virtua Health, right? If I went to an emergency room at Virtua one day, and then 2 weeks later, I still have the same ailment, I'm getting worse, and the closest ER to me is Cooper University Medical Hospital, right? And I go there. Let's say I was put on an antibiotic. At the last hospital, I was given an MRI, and they ran these 10 lab tests on me, right? To the tune of $10,000, probably at an ER. And yet 2 weeks later, I go to a different ER because I'm feeling the same pain, the same ailments, right? One would assume that an efficient marketplace that doctor that I'm now seeing would immediately have access to all my medical records. They would know that I was just in the ER. They would know what my vitals were, what medications I'm on, what tests I was given, and what my lab work said. Not only because it's more efficient, but it's going to allow them to treat me more quickly in a safer manner, right? Because they're going to know that they can't put me on another medication because it might have an adverse reaction with the other one.
Sure.
In today's world, that doesn't happen. That hospital is going to say, yeah, I know you just went to the hospital 2 weeks ago, but we don't have access to that. So we're going to have to run all of our own tests. Now, if you put on your cynic hat, you're going to say, why is that? Is it because getting that information is too difficult? No, not in today's world when you can send, have information a super highway, right?
Yeah.
The reason they're going to tell you that they need you to take their MRI is because when they run their MRI machine, they're going to get the $2,000. When they do their lab work at their in-house lab, they're going to get the $3,000, right? So it's, and this is why it's really important to just go back to the basics, right, of Econ 101 and building a smart consumer base. I get that physicians take a Hippocratic oath, but hospitals and the administrators and the revenue cycle managers, they're running a business, and often you're at the, you're the market share in that business as a patient. And so I do think unless we incentivize a smarter, more efficient marketplace where that hospital is either required to or incentivized to share that information and be the recipient of that information, I don't think we're going to get to a place where technology is unleashing value.
But Kristen, I want to piggyback on to what you just said. Do you think me as a consumer and I get slapped with, let's say, a $2,000 bill, do I have the right to go and tell that clinic that don't read test and start getting the data from the other folks? Do I have the right to say that?
You do have a legal right to your medical records, and you have a legal right to say, hospital X, I have signed a HIPAA release. Please send my medical records to my current hospital. The problem is, right, you're a consumer that's having chest pain, or your elderly parent is having chest pain, and you're the caregiver, right? And this is really the sad part about the healthcare system that we've built, is you're not a consumer at this point. You're a captive audience of one that wants to make sure. If you have a doctor or a physician in an ER telling you, no, I don't have that information, we need to get your mother to a MRI machine stat, and we need to do this blood work, that's going to take too long. What are you going to, like, of course you're going to do what they tell you to. They're the doctor.
Of course.
Right? So, this is why I think empowering consumers with knowledge is really important, but I also am not under the illusion that a consumer, a quote unquote consumer in the heat of a cancer diagnosis is going to be able to say, is that really the most efficient way to spend my money? That's why we as healthcare leaders and policy leaders need to create a marketplace that incentivizes behavior that is right for the patient and right for the system delivering to patients.
Yeah, thank you again. Now, you bring up a good point that, I cannot get data from X person and Y person and all that stuff, right? Is there like a centralized database that everyone can just get access to?
Nope.
So I think that's where the lack is, and is that where the break is somewhere?
Yeah, I mean,
or a gap, I should say.
Data is key in healthcare, right? And it's the way in which, and the big legacy players monetize data in many different ways. There is a new law, a new provision for self-funded employers, at least, that says the employer can now own their data and do what they wish with it, within the bounds of HIPAA.
Sure.
But no, I mean, I think that's the if you want to Google interoperability rules, you can learn a lot about this challenge that you're talking about, is that as much as the government tries to force and incentivize the hospital systems and the provider community to, get systems in place and buy technology that would allow for interoperability. I mean, we've been fighting this battle for a long time, and it continues. And I think that some of the reasons why interoperability and the challenges we face continue to exist is the reason I just gave. If there is a financial disincentive for a profit-seeking or revenue-seeking entity to speak to other competitors, then I think we're going to continue to have this challenge.
You bring up a good point. Let's say if a private clinic, they want to take care of the data with the HIPAA, guidelines, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. Hypothetically, if that clinic closes tomorrow, my data is gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are legal obligations that they would have to keep it for a certain set period of time.
Okay.
So, and whether to get their state license, they have to abide by certain rules and regulations. But trying to access that data is probably quite difficult.
Sure.
I mean, trying even with the clout of the state health plan with 800,000 people, trying to get our data in a manner that was usable and clean. And when I say clean, I mean, you have a claim file with 250 fields and they all have to be, speaking to each other and correct. To get a nice data set from our own carrier was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So, and that's for a mammoth organization. I can only imagine and that's what's sort of so absurd about this is we as patients, this is our information, right? Our health records are our information, and personal health records are certainly something we're working towards. But there's having the data, and then there's well, what can I do with it? Right? How is it actionable, and what change is it going to drive?
Yeah, so we're going to get into the technology, but for one quick question, when you go to, let's say, a credit report to get your credit once a year, can you do a one year dump of your medical health for yourself for me to keep a record for myself? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends on who your health, the middlemen that are sort of play gatekeeper to this data
Yeah,
are the quote unquote, the carriers, the
of course.
Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, Humanas of the world, and um, getting your data from them is, it's not as universal. It's not like a credit report. It's not something that you are entitled, that there's really a sort of clear path for you to submit this form and get
Of
your
course.
medical records.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you again. Let me talk to my audience here 1 second.
Hmm.
So, guys, there's no one big database, but there's one big database, which is you. You have to keep track of what you are going to be doing or not doing, how much you're spending, not spending, who did you visit, who did you not visit. Just be mindful whenever you go to a doctor. I went to Christine and got my blood test done. Do I need to go to John and do another blood test? Probably not. Let's contact Christine and find out that, you know what, is my cholesterol low? Is my cholesterol high? Do I have cancer? Do I not have cancer? Let's take a second opinion. Those are the things that we need to start looking at and be aware. And that's what we're trying to do in this show, to make you and me and even Christine also to be aware of these things. Yeah, so thank you again, by the way, for that.
Hmm.
So from a technology point, now we're getting into the electronic world, which is the VR and XR and all the other stuff. Is this a fun world or is this a learning curve world of healthcare?
I think it's a fun world, but also, so a lot of fun. There's a lot of new entrants. There's a lot of capital flowing into this digital health marketplace. I mean, um, I know these statistics because I used them in a talk the other day. I think in 2010, there was $3 billion in capital going into digital health solutions. In 2021, there was 14.7 billion going into digital health. In the first half, I'm sorry, that was 2020. In the first half of 2021, there was over 14 billion. So we're on pace to exceed 20 billion in this space. So, I mean, I think that there's certainly, the markets are telling us that this is the future, right? This is part of the future. But I think the learning curve will be, how do these new companies play with the legacy players? How do they bring value and show value to both their investors and their ultimate purchasers, which is, usually an employer or the government, and engagement. I mean, I think that, the reason many of your listeners probably heard, right? Like Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, like they tried to solve healthcare with a company that they created because you thought, oh, you get technology and smart people, and of course we can solve this big problem called healthcare. And that, quite frankly, they were met with, I think, just insurmountable challenges and a complete lack of understanding of the path that lie ahead and the difficult path that lie ahead. So I think that there's promise, but it's a cautious promise. And I also, again, with that much money flowing into this market, if you look at the healthcare cost to the U.S. economy at 20% of the GDP, close to $4 trillion a year, right? Our goal should not be to pile on more digital solutions to add to that pie, right? The pie needs to shrink, because if there's one true ROI in healthcare, it's that better health outcomes equals lower cost. So I think that it's promising, but we need to make sure that we're not, again, just taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other and adding a few bills.
Yeah, thank you again. And just very quickly, I know that you have to leave very quickly, but you know what? These patients are using digital apps to help and to get data. For example, for COVID, we're using Docket, which is the government app. Okay, and you put all the vaccines that you have taken so far and keeping track of those. So are we living in a new world that now we're going to live in the digital app world versus paper world? I mean, what are your thoughts on that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly healthcare consumers are getting more familiar with using digital apps for to access healthcare. I do think that there is a certain sense of app fatigue amongst users. And also at the end of the day, there are it apps and the digital market will play a role, but healthcare is not shopping for a vacation, right? Like Travelocity. It's not shopping for a car like
That's right.
Carvana. It's not, right? It's not getting a ride like Uber. Like these were all sort of transformative models, or Zillow, like I'm buying real estate. Because healthcare really is just, it's just a different animal, and it's a different um, engagement with trust with your physician. And so I think we just need to be mindful as we are trying to unpack and then repack this issue, that of those differences, and that we're building products for the with the patients in mind,
Mm.
right? Like a good example, I was on the phone the other day with some digital, like venture capitalists who were considering investment in a digital health app for some ailment, or right, and they were very much concerned about their market, like who's their demographic, right? And well, we can teach the older generation how to use it and how to, right? And I said, folks, like the thing you need to do is you need to create something for that demographic,
Mm.
right? Stop making a square hole and then trying to shove a round peg in it,
Mm.
right? So being mindful of how we're creating these things for the audience that will use them, and how it augments and complements the physician relationship, going back to that primary care relationship that we really need to re-elevate in our society, would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you again, Kristen, for coming here and explaining all the details from a capital and financial point of view, all the way down to the digital world that we're living in. And we were kind of scared to get into the digital world, and I think we're kind of comfortable now. I think, and I
Yeah.
think now we're just testing the waters as to what is the next 5 years from now. What are your thoughts on the next 5 years that we're going to see?
Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, I hope that we see, again, just to go back, a marrying, and this is really a great way to end it, but that advanced primary care model where they're really serving as the quarterback of our healthcare journey. But as we face a physician crisis, and certainly a GP crisis in America, I mean, we don't have enough GPs to right now um, to meet the demand. It's really, I think, all of the digital tools that we just spoke about, right, are really going to streamline things and make that relationship more efficient, right? If you're a diabetic and you have a good primary care relationship, that diabetic might then get access to a digital therapeutic app
Hmm.
or wearable that's able to in real time communicate with that doctor, so they're not having to pick up the phone and call,
That's right.
or they're not taking up a nurse line, right? So tech enabled advanced primary care, I hope, and will do my best as a healthcare, hopefully, influencer and leader to see that be a part of our future. And also, again, I think as we look 5 years out, I hope that we're not still talking about reducing the growth of our healthcare spend, but we're actually talking about cost reduction. Um, if as we go, as we face things like climate change and increasing social inequities and possibilities of future pandemics, right? 20% of our GDP is going towards healthcare spending. We're
Hmm.
not getting better outcomes. We spend less than 4% of our GDP on education. We
Hmm.
spend less than 1% on climate change infrastructure.
Hmm.
Think about the social impact we could have by moving those dollars to more, productive and socially beneficial areas
Yeah.
that not only are going to improve our well-being as a society, but will in fact improve our health outcomes, and our overall, just unleashing the economy and the ingenuity of the American economy, by unshackling some of those 20%.
Yeah, thank you again. And one last thing, what are your thoughts on Back to Basics that you have been here and now you have done so much, and you came into my show? And what are your thoughts and experience on Back to Basics?
Well, I really enjoyed it. As you can tell, I get really enthusiastic and excited when anybody asks me to talk about healthcare. I hope there's a 2.0, right? Or maybe a second follow-up discussion that we can have if any of your listeners want to dive a bit deeper, or, cover a different healthcare, economic topic. And I think these conversations are really important. And, civil dialogue is something that's missing a lot today. And I really feel like this type of conversation can lead to more civil dialogue, which leads to change.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would definitely love for you to come back again on Back to Basics as a part three and a part four or something like that. But thank you again for coming here and supporting me in this small journey that I have on my
Great.
podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we spoke with Kristen today and we talked about the basics of health and healthcare and the capital and the technologies, that the world that we're living in, the metaverse that we're going to be getting into soon, eventually. But guys, we just need to be aware of one thing. Health is one thing that we live in. This is the vessel that we live in. Take care of it. Nurture it. Try to understand it. Yes, it does get expensive. But you know what? You are the ones who need to spend money or not spend money. That's up to you. But here's a quote of the day, and hopefully Kristen will like this quote of the day. And the quote of the day is, "To keep the body in good health is a duty, otherwise we shall not be able to keep the mind strong and clear." That's what it is. That's what I said. And as usual, as always, what do I always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next week. Keep on commenting as much as you can. Good, bad, and ugly. Either way, it'll make my show stronger day by day, week by week. And there's three things that this show is going to be awesome: the content, the guest, and definitely the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next week. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
And for the endurance, for the strength that you're intended to, no matter what your passion or purpose is. And lastly is that spirit place, that mind, body, and soul, and I connect it to my belief system alongside the Holy Spirit.
Wow, thank you so much, Tamara, for coming on the show and answering this question. It seems like no matter how many times I ask this question to many different people, there are different perspectives when it comes to Back to Basics, and your perspectives is amazing, and thank you so much for that. So thank you again for coming on the show. So let me ask you this. You are a power girl when it comes to business coaching, and I've seen most of the activities going on LinkedIn and all the postings that you've done. Okay, where do you get that drive and where do you get that trigger to do what you do?
It's a good question as well. I think ultimately it comes from the fact of my crash and burn, which isn't generally where people start, or the vulnerability of people when they ask where the drive comes from. It's usually associated to